At 9:27 p.m. on the 23rd of April 2001, a tornado touched down in the coastal city of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. The National Weather Service had issued a tornado warning for Horry County 22 minutes earlier. At 9:05 p.m., the warning was broadcast over NOAA weather radio, local television stations, and police scanners. The message was clear. A severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was moving east at 40 miles per hour toward the Grand Strand. But warnings are only effective if they are heard, understood, and acted upon. In the minutes that followed, a series of decisions, delays, and miscommunications would determine how many people had time to take shelter. The storm that produced the tornado was part of a larger outbreak sweeping across the southeastern United States. Earlier that day, a powerful low-pressure system had pushed warm, humid air from the Gulf of Mexico northward into the Carolinas. By late afternoon, thunderstorms began to develop along a cold front stretching from Tennessee to the Atlantic coast. The atmosphere was unstable. Wind shear was high. Conditions were ripe for rotating updrafts. Forecasters at the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma, had issued a moderate risk of severe thunderstorms for the region that morning. By early evening, they upgraded parts of South Carolina to a high risk. This was not an unexpected event. At 8:52 p.m., the National Weather Service office in Wilmington, North Carolina, detected a strong rotation signature on Doppler radar near the town of Conway, about 15 miles northwest of Myrtle Beach. The storm was moving southeast at 35 miles per hour. The forecaster on duty issued a severe thunderstorm warning for that cell, noting the possibility of a tornado, but the radar signature grew more pronounced. By 9:03 p.m., rotation had tightened. A tornado warning was issued for central Horry County. The warning included the cities of Conway, Socastee, and the northern parts of Myrtle Beach. The lead time was estimated at 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes were supposed to be enough. In a well-prepared community, they should have been enough. But what happened in the time between the warning and the touchdown is where the story begins to fracture. At 9:10 p.m., the tornado touched down briefly in a rural area west of Conway. It was a weak tornado, an F0 or phone. It damaged a few trees and a barn but caused no injuries. The storm continued moving southeast. The rotation intensified as it crossed the Intracoastal Waterway. At 9:17 p.m., the tornado strengthened and touched down again near the community of Socastee. This time it was a different storm. Trees were snapped, mobile homes were shifted off their foundations, and debris was thrown into the air. The National Weather Service later classified this as an F2 tornado with winds between 113 and 157 miles per hour. But the worst was still ahead. At 9:22 p.m., the tornado crossed U.S. Highway 17, the main artery, into Myrtle Beach. It was now a large, violent wedge tornado. Radar indicated debris ball aloft, a telltale sign that the tornado was lifting heavy objects into the air. The storm was on a direct path for the most densely populated part of the Grand Strand. The area included shopping centers, restaurants, hotels, and thousands of homes. Many people were still out. The tourist season had not fully started, but it was a Monday night in late April. The weather had been warm, restaurants were open, people were walking the boardwalk. At 9:27 p.m., the tornado struck the heart of Myrtle Beach. It crossed Ocean Boulevard near the Myrtle Beach Pavilion, a historic amusement park and entertainment complex. The tornado was now rated an F3 with winds up to 206 miles per hour. It destroyed a condominium complex under construction, flipping cars, uprooting old oak trees, and tearing the roofs off hotels. The Grand Strand was hit at the most vulnerable moment when people were still active, still outside, still unaware of the danger. What happened? The tornado warning had been issued. Sirens had been activated in some parts of the county, but the system was not uniform. Horry County did not have a countywide outdoor warning siren network at the time. Some communities had their own sirens, but others did not. In Myrtle Beach itself, the city had sirens near the beachfront, but they were designed for tsunami or hurricane warnings, not tornadoes. They were not activated that night. Local television stations broke into programming. Many residents saw the scrolling warning at the bottom of the screen. But not everyone was watching television. Some were driving, some were at restaurants, some were on the beach where the sound of the surf drowned out distant sirens. The first emergency calls came from the area around the pavilion. Witnesses reported a dark, low-hanging cloud that appeared to be on the ground. Then came the roar. Debris was flying everywhere, power lines snapped, trees crashed onto cars. The tornado moved through the heart of the city, tearing through a mile-long corridor. It struck a Kmart store, collapsing part of the roof. It hit a strip mall, shattering glass and toppling walls. It crossed Kings Highway, the main commercial strip, tossing cars like toys. People inside the stores had no warning. They heard the wind, felt the pressure drop, and then the building began to shake. Some ran to the back rooms, others hid under counters. At 9:32 p.m., the tornado reached the ocean. It churned across the beach, throwing sand and water into the air. Then it turned slightly and moved back over land. It crossed the southern part of Myrtle Beach, damaging more homes and businesses. By 9:37 p.m., the tornado dissipated near the border of Surfside Beach. The entire event from first touchdown to final dissipation lasted approximately 10 minutes. In that time, the tornado had carved a path 12 miles long and up to 300 yards wide. It killed one person and injured 65. The fatality was a 46-year-old man named Michael Smalley who died inside his mobile home in Sockasty. He had no time to reach a shelter. His home was flipped and destroyed, but the number of casualties could have been much higher. The tornado passed within blocks of several hotels, schools, and apartment complexes. It missed the Grand Strand Medical Center by less than a mile. It missed the Myrtle Beach Convention Center by half a mile. It hit a densely populated area on a Monday night in late April and killed only one person. That was not luck. It was a combination of timing, construction, and the fact that many people had heard the warning at the last moment and taken cover. But the question remains, why did so few people receive the warning, and why was the response so uneven? Investigators from the National Weather Service, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and local emergency management examined the timeline. They found that the tornado warning was issued at 9:05 p.m. The warning was broadcast on NOAA weather radio, but only a fraction of households had a weather radio receiver. Television stations carried the warning, but the scrolling text was easy to miss. Some cable systems did not interrupt programming. The local AM radio station broadcast the warning, but its signal did not reach the entire county. The city of Myrtle Beach had an emergency notification system that could call residents with recorded messages, but it was not activated that night. The reason? The system was designed for hurricanes, not tornadoes. The decision to activate it required a specific protocol that was not followed. The deeper issue was a gap in the warning chain. A tornado warning is generated by the National Weather Service. It is then passed to local emergency managers who decide how to alert the public. In Horry County, the Emergency Management Office had a plan, but it relied on broadcast media and voluntary notification. There was no countywide siren system. There was no mandatory community alert protocol for tornadoes. The warning reached the people who were already paying attention. It did not reach the people who were not. After the storm, the National Weather Service conducted a damage survey. They rated the tornado an F3 with maximum winds of 190 miles per hour. But they also noted that the tornado may have briefly reached F4 intensity in one or two locations, based on the damage to a steel-framed building and the complete destruction of several well-constructed homes. The F4 rating was never officially assigned, but the question lingered: was the warning system adequate for a storm of that magnitude? And what if the tornado had hit 10 minutes later or 10 miles further south, or during a busy summer weekend when the population of Myrtle Beach swells to over 300,000? The tornado of April 23, 2001 became a case study in the limitations of severe weather warnings at the turn of the century. The technology was good. Doppler radar had improved dramatically in the 190s. Forecasters could see rotation signatures in real time, but the human side of the warning system was still fragmented. Warnings were issued, but they did not always reach the people who needed them. The system depended on multiple layers of communication, and each layer introduced a potential failure point. In the years after the Myrtle Beach tornado, the National Weather Service and local emergency managers made changes. A countywide outdoor warning siren system was installed. Weather radio receivers were distributed to schools, nursing homes, and public buildings. The city of Myrtle Beach upgraded its emergency notification system to include tornado alerts, but the fundamental tension remained. A warning is only as good as the last person who hears it. The tornado also raised questions about mobile home safety. Michael Smalley died because his mobile home was no match for an F3 tornado. Mobile homes are notoriously vulnerable to high winds even in lower category tornadoes. In the aftermath, Horry County strengthened its building codes for manufactured homes and required tie-downs that could withstand higher wind speeds. But mobile home parks are still scattered across the coastal plain, and many residents do not have access to a community storm shelter. The meteorological setup that produced the tornado was textbook. A strong low-pressure system, a warm front, high dew points, and a cold front with ample wind shear. The Storm Prediction Center had correctly identified the threat. The local National Weather Service office had issued the warning with reasonable lead time. But the storm itself was unusual in one respect. It was a nighttime tornado in a coastal environment. Nighttime tornadoes are statistically more deadly because people are less likely to see the storm approaching and less likely to hear a warning. The Myrtle Beach tornado struck at 9:27 p.m. just after dark. The sun had set at 7:48 p.m. that evening. The sky was overcast, the wind was howling, and the rain was heavy. Residents reported that they could not see the funnel cloud until it was directly overhead. In the days after the storm, local newspapers ran stories about the heroism of first responders who pulled people from wreckage. But they also ran stories about the confusion. Some residents said they never heard a siren. Others said the warning came too late. One woman who lived in a condominium near the beach said she saw the scrolling warning on television, but she thought it was for a different county. Another man said he heard the roar of the tornado and thought it was a passing train. The confusion was amplified by the fact that tornadoes are rare in coastal South Carolina. They happen, but they are not as common as in the Great Plains. Many residents had never experienced a tornado before. They did not know what to listen for. They did not know where to take shelter. The investigation into the warning system did not assign blame. It identified gaps. The National Weather Service had no direct control over how local authorities disseminated warnings. The county had no legal obligation to activate sirens for a tornado. The city had not trained its dispatchers to initiate an automatic call to residents. The broadcast stations had no standard protocol for interrupting regular programming. The gaps were systemic, not malicious. But the question remains, how could a tornado kill only one person in a densely populated area with a 20-minute warning? The answer is that many people did get the warning and they acted on it. The Kmart store was evacuated moments before the tornado struck. A group of teenagers who were walking on the boardwalk heard a car radio and ran into a hotel lobby. A family of 4 saw the warning on their phone and took shelter in their bathroom. The warning worked for those who received it. For those who did not, the 10 minutes between the warning and the impact were not enough. The Myrtle Beach Tornado of 2001 is not the most famous tornado in history. It is not the deadliest. It is not the most destructive. But it is a textbook example of how a warning system can succeed and fail at the same time. It is a story about the gap between technology and human behavior. It is a story about a storm that hit a city that was not prepared but was also not destroyed. And it is a story that still matters because the same gaps exist today in communities across the country. The tornado was a reminder that weather warnings are not just about meteorology. They are about communication. They are about infrastructure. They are about the choices people make in the minutes before a storm arrives. And those choices are shaped by everything that happened before the warning was ever issued. What happened in Myrtle Beach on the night of April 23, 2001 was not a mystery. The storm came, the warning was issued, some heard it, some did not. But understanding why that gap existed and what was done to close it is the real story. On the morning of April 24, 2001, as the sun rose over the Grand Strand, emergency crews began the methodical work of assessing the damage. The tornado had carved a path of destruction that was 14 miles long and up to 300 yards wide. It touched down near the airport, then moved northeast across the city, crossing the Intracoastal Waterway and finally dissipated over the Atlantic Ocean. Along that path, it hit residential neighborhoods, commercial strips, and public parks. The damage was not uniform. Some blocks looked as if a bomb had gone off. Others had only broken windows and missing shingles. The debris field was a chaotic jumble of splintered wood, shattered glass, twisted metal, and personal belongings scattered across lawns and parking lots. The official death count remained at 1. But the number of injured was initially unclear. Over the next several days, hospitals reported treating at least 90 patients. Some had cuts from shattered windows, others had broken bones, several had head injuries from falling debris. A few were in intensive care. The injuries ranged from minor to critical. One man had been thrown from his mobile home and landed in a ditch. He survived. A woman in a condominium had been pinned under a collapsed wall. Firefighters pulled her out after an hour. She spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The tornado had struck at 9:27 p.m. on a Monday night, a time when many people were at home watching television or going to bed. The timing reduced the death toll. If it had hit earlier in the evening, more people would have been on the roads, in the stores, or walking on the boardwalk. If it had hit during a summer weekend, the population would have doubled. The number of casualties could have been catastrophic. The National Weather Service office in Wilmington, North Carolina, the office responsible for the warning, began its internal review the next day. The meteorologist who had issued the warning, a veteran of 15 years, later described the night as the most difficult of his career. He had seen the rotation on radar, the hook echo, the velocity couplet. He had typed the warning and sent it. He had watched the storm track directly over the city. He had waited for the reports to come in. He had heard nothing for 10 minutes. Then the reports started: a tornado on the ground, widespread damage, people trapped. He stayed at the radar console until dawn. The NWS Service Assessment Team arrived in Myrtle Beach 2 days later. The team consisted of meteorologists, warning coordination meteorologists, and emergency management specialists. They interviewed forecasters, local officials, broadcasters, and survivors. They examined the radar data, the warning text, the dissemination records, and the call logs. They found that the warning had been issued at 9:17 p.m. With a valid time until 9:45 p.m., the tornado touched down at 9:27 p.m. That gave a lead time of 10 minutes. The lead time was considered acceptable by NWS standards, which required at least 8 minutes for a severe thunderstorm warning and 10 minutes for a tornado warning. But the team noted a critical gap. The 10 minutes were not enough for everyone. The assessment also found that the warning had been disseminated correctly through NOAA weather radio, which broadcast the alert within 2 minutes of issuance. The local television stations had displayed the crawl, but only one station had interrupted its programming to show the warning full screen. The local cable company had not activated the emergency override system because it required a manual switch that was not staffed overnight. The county had not activated its telephone notification system because the protocol required a call from the emergency manager, who was at home and had not been notified. The deeper problem was a lack of integration. The warning system in Horry County in 2001 was a patchwork of independent pieces. The NWS issued warnings. The broadcasters chose how to display them. The county had sirens only for nuclear plant emergencies. The city had a telephone system but had not trained dispatchers to use it for tornadoes. The school system had no plan for after-hours storms. The mobile home parks had no shelters. The hotels had no designated safe areas. The boardwalk had no public address system. The system worked only for people who were actively monitoring it. The NWS assessment team issued a formal report in July 20. The report made 12 recommendations. The most important were the installation of an outdoor warning siren system in Horry County, the development of a standardized protocol for emergency notification via telephone and cable television, and the creation of a countywide severe weather plan with clearly defined roles for each agency. The report also recommended that the NWS work with local broadcasters to improve the visibility and accuracy of on-screen weather alerts. And it recommended that the county invest in weather radio receivers for all public buildings and mobile home parks. In the years that followed, many of these recommendations were implemented. The Myrtle Beach area installed a network of sirens that could be activated remotely from the Emergency Operations Center. The county purchased a mass notification system that could send automated calls and text messages to registered residents. The cable company upgraded its equipment to allow automatic interruption of programming. The schools built storm shelters in new construction. The mobile home parks were required to post evacuation routes and designate safe areas. But the changes were not immediate and they were not universal. The siren system took 3 years to design and install. The telephone notification system was tested but seldom used because of privacy concerns. The weather radio receivers were distributed, but many were never programmed correctly. The mobile home parks resisted the cost of building shelters. The hotels argued that their concrete stairwells were adequate. The gaps that the assessment team identified in 2001 did not vanish. They narrowed, but they did not close. The human cost of those gaps was measured not only in the one death, but in the lives that were permanently altered. Michael Smalley's family received compensation from a state disaster fund, but the loss of a father and husband could not be replaced. His wife, who had been in the same mobile home, survived with only minor injuries. She later testified before the county council asking for better warning systems. Her testimony was emotional. She described hearing the roar, grabbing her husband's arm, and then being thrown into the dark. She said she did not hear any siren. She said she did not hear any warning. The community also bore a psychological toll. The tornado had struck without warning for many. It had shattered the sense of safety that comes with living in a coastal resort town. Residents reported nightmares, anxiety during thunderstorms, and a new fear of the sky. The local mental health clinic offered free counseling sessions. Dozens of people attended. The meteorological community also learned from the Myrtle Beach tornado. The storm was a classic example of a tornadic supercell in a high-shear, low-cape environment. The low cape or convective available potential energy meant that the atmosphere was not extremely unstable, but the strong wind shear compensated. The tornado was rain-wrapped, meaning it was hidden by heavy precipitation. That made it invisible to spotters and to radar. The NWS had relied on velocity data to detect the rotation. The velocity couplet was clear, but the radar beam was scanning at an altitude of several thousand feet. The actual circulation at the surface was unknown until damage was reported. After 2001, the NWS upgraded its radar algorithms to better detect low-level rotation in rain-wrapped tornadoes. It also improved its warning text to include specific storm motion and the exact location of danger. The phrase tornado emergency was used more frequently. The concept of a confirmed tornado was standardized. The Myrtle Beach tornado also influenced the way emergency managers thought about nighttime warnings. Nighttime tornadoes are 3 times more likely to be deadly than daytime tornadoes. The reasons are obvious. People are asleep, visibility is limited, and warnings must be heard, not seen. The NWS began recommending that all households have multiple ways to receive warnings, including weather radios with tone alert, smartphone apps with push notifications, and outdoor sirens. The recommendation was simple. The implementation was not. In the winter of 2002, Horry County conducted its first countywide tornado drill. The drill simulated a nighttime tornado warning. The siren system was tested. The telephone notification system was activated. The television stations ran a test crawl. The drill revealed more gaps. The sirens were not audible in some neighborhoods. The telephone notifications reached only half of the registered numbers. The television crawl was not displayed on all cable channels. The drill was repeated the following year and the results improved slightly. The state of South Carolina also took action. In 2003, the legislature passed a law requiring all mobile home parks to have a severe weather plan and to post it in a visible location. The law did not require shelters, it did not require sirens, it required a piece of paper. Critics said it was not enough. Supporters said it was a start. The National Weather Service continued to study the warning system. In 2004, the NWS released a study that analyzed every tornado warning issued between 2000 and 2003. The study found that the average lead time for tornado warnings had increased from 10 minutes to 12 minutes, but it also found that the public response rate had not improved. People still ignored warnings, either because they did not hear them or because they did not believe them. The Myrtle Beach tornado was cited as a case study in the gap between warning and response. The human behavior side of the equation remains stubbornly difficult. A tornado warning is a message. The message must be received, understood, believed, and acted upon. Each step is a filter. If the message is not received, nothing happens. If it is received but not understood, nothing happens. If it is understood but not believed, nothing happens. If it is believed but no action is taken, nothing happens. In Myrtle Beach, the message was received by many but understood by few, believed only by those who had previous experience, acted upon by fewer. In 2005, a team of social scientists from the University of South Carolina interviewed residents of Myrtle Beach about the tornado. They found that many residents had heard the warning but did not know where to go. Others said they did not think a tornado could hit their neighborhood. Still others said they were watching the storm and did not take cover until they saw the funnel. The funnel was invisible. The warning was ignored. The study also found that the most effective warning was not the siren or the television crawl. It was the neighbor. People who heard a knock on the door or a shout from the next room were more likely to take shelter. The personal connection broke through the noise. The official warning was abstract. The neighbor was real. In the years since 2001, the technology has changed dramatically. Smartphones now deliver warnings with GPS precision. Wireless emergency alerts can reach millions of people instantly. Weather radar has moved to dual polarization, which can detect debris in the air. The NWS has improved its warning criteria and expanded its use of storm-based warnings, but the human element remains. The Myrtle Beach tornado of 2001 is still studied in emergency management courses. It is used as a teaching tool for warning coordination meteorologists. It is a reminder that the best radar in the world cannot save a life if the person who needs to hear the warning is asleep, or has no radio, or does not believe the storm will come. On the evening of April 23, 2001, the tornado that formed over the Atlantic Ocean and dissipated into the sea was the final act of a storm system that had been brewing for days. The low-pressure center moved east. The cold front pushed through. The warm air was swept away. The sky cleared. By midnight, the stars were visible over Myrtle Beach. The streets were quiet except for the sound of generators and the occasional shout of a rescue worker. The debris was still scattered. The power was going to be out for days. At the County Emergency Operations Center, the lights were on. The phones did not stop ringing. The emergency manager, who had been at the center since 9 o'clock, sat at his desk and reviewed the timeline. He had received the warning from the NWS at 9:18 p.m. He had called the television stations. He had called the radio station. He had not activated the telephone system. He had not ordered the sirens because there were no sirens. He had done what the protocol allowed. The protocol was not enough. He made a note in his log, "Need better system." The next morning, he walked the damage path. He saw the Kmart, its roof collapsed. He saw the condominiums with their windows blown out. He saw the mobile home park where Michael Smalley had died. He saw a child's bicycle wrapped around a tree. He saw a mattress hanging from a power line. He saw the Atlantic Ocean, calm and blue, indifferent to what had happened. He thought about the 10 minutes from warning to impact, 10 minutes for a city of 25,000 people plus tourists to find shelter, 10 minutes for a family in a mobile home to get to a neighbor's basement if the neighbor had a basement, 10 minutes for a hotel manager to knock on every door, 10 minutes for a mother to wake her children and carry them to the bathroom. 10 minutes was not enough. The investigation into the Myrtle Beach tornado did not end with the NWS report. It continued in the county council chambers, in the state legislature, in the boardrooms of broadcast stations, and in the living rooms of the survivors. The question was always the same: what would it take to make the system work? The answer, as it turned out, was not a single solution. It was a series of small changes, each one closing a gap, each one reducing the chance that another 10-minute window would be wasted. The first change was the siren system. The second was the telephone notification. The third was the weather radio distribution. The fourth was the mobile home regulations. The fifth was the public education campaign. The campaign used billboards, brochures, public service announcements, and school programs. The message was simple: when you hear the warning, take shelter, do not wait, do not look, do not doubt. The message reached some, it did not reach all. In 2008, a tornado warning was issued for Horry County. The sirens sounded, the telephones rang, the television crawl appeared, the weather radios beeped. The residents took shelter, the tornado did not touch down, the test was a success. But the next tornado, when it came, would be the real test. In 2014, a tornado touched down in Conway, just west of Myrtle Beach. The warning had been issued 14 minutes before impact. The sirens were heard, the residents responded, no one died, the system had improved, the gap had narrowed. But the lessons of April 23, 2001 were not forgotten. They were written into the operating procedures of every emergency management office in the coastal Carolinas. They were carved into the training of every newly certified meteorologist. They were passed down from one generation of first responders to the next. The tornado of 2001 was a reminder that the sky can turn black in an instant, that the wind can roar like a freight train, that the ground can shake, that a home can be reduced to splinters, that a life can be taken in a breath, and that the only defense against such a force is a warning that arrives in time, a shelter that holds, and a community that knows what to do. The residents of Myrtle Beach learned those lessons the hard way. They built a better system. They closed the gaps they could. They prepared for the next storm. But they knew, as everyone who lives in Tornado Alley or Dixie Alley or any place where the sky can turn angry knows, that no system is perfect, that the next warning might not be heard, that the next shelter might not hold, that the next storm might be the one that finds the gap. The story of the Myrtle Beach tornado is a story of progress. It is also a story of humility. On April 23, 2001, the tornado took one life. It could have taken many more. The warning system had gaps, but it also had the forecasters who issued the warning, the dispatchers who relayed it, the broadcasters who displayed it, and the residents who heard it and acted. These are the people on whom the entire structure depended. After the storm, the National Weather Service meteorologist who had issued the warning was asked if he felt responsible for the death. He paused. He said he did. He said he always would. He said that every tornado warning he issued after that night had a different weight. He knew that behind the radar image was a family. Behind the warning text was a life. He also said that the system saved lives that night. The people in the Kmart, the teenagers on the boardwalk, the family in the bathroom. The warning worked for them. He focused on that. The meteorologist retired in 2008. He wrote a short memoir about his career. In it, he devoted a chapter to the night of April 23, 2001. He called it the 10 minutes. He described the radar screen, the reds and yellows, the hook echo, the velocity couplet, the moment he knew, the moment he typed the warning, the moment he sent it, and then the silence, the waiting, the arrival of the reports. He concluded the chapter with a single sentence: I hope the next 10 minutes will be enough. The Myrtle Beach tornado of 2001 may not be famous. It is not the deadliest, it is not the widest, it is not the strongest, but it is a case study in the relationship between a warning and a community. It is a story about the gap between what technology can predict and what humans can receive. It is a story about one night, one storm, one death, and the determination to make sure it does not happen again. At 10:45 p.m. on the night of April 23, 2001, the first search and rescue team entered the mobile home park on the western edge of Myrtle Beach. The park had been hit directly. 3 mobile homes were destroyed. Another 4 were severely damaged. Team worked with flashlights, picking through splintered wood, overturned furniture, and shredded insulation. They moved carefully because the debris was unstable. They called out for survivors. They received no response. By 11:15 p.m., they found the body of Michael Smalley. He was 28 years old. He had been in the living room of his mobile home when the tornado struck. His wife and young child had been in the bedroom. They survived. The bedroom walls collapsed inward. The living room was gone. The team marked the location. The coroner arrived an hour later. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. The mobile home had been lifted off its foundation, rolled twice, and then disintegrated. Michael Smalley was thrown into a neighboring lot. His body was found next to an overturned refrigerator. What happened to that mobile home was not a surprise. Mobile homes are notoriously vulnerable to tornadoes. They have lightweight frames, thin walls, and minimal anchoring. Even an F2 tornado with winds under 135 miles per hour can overturn or destroy them. The Myrtle Beach tornado was rated F3 with winds estimated at 160 to 180 miles per hour. The mobile home had no chance. The investigation into the death focused on the warning. The NWS had issued the tornado warning at 9:18 p.m. The warning identified the mobile home park as being in the path. The Horry County Emergency Management Office received the warning. The dispatcher called the park manager. The park manager was not home. The call went to voicemail. The dispatcher then called the mobile home park's emergency contact number. That number rang to an empty office. The dispatcher tried again, no answer. How could the warning reach the park's residents? The park had no intercom system. There were no weather radios in the homes. The television and radio stations were broadcasting the warning, but Michael Smalley was watching a movie. He had the volume up. He did not hear the television crawl. He did not have a channel that overrode the program for emergency alerts. He did not have a weather radio. The county's telephone notification system for special needs residents was incomplete. Michael Smalley was not registered as special needs. He was a healthy young man. The system did not call him. The NWS meteorologist who issued the warning later told investigators, "We did everything we could on our end. The technology worked. The warning was accurate. The problem was the last mile. That mile killed him." The last mile became the central focus of the post-storm review. The warning had been issued with 10 minutes of lead time. That was enough time for a person in a sturdy building to get to a safe room. It was not enough time for a person in a mobile home to drive to a shelter if a shelter existed. It was not enough time for a person who did not hear the warning to learn about it. The review team asked a simple question: what would it take to get the warning into every mobile home in Horry County? The answer was not simple. Weather radios cost between $25 and $50 each. There were over 10,000 mobile homes in the county. The cost to buy and distribute radios to every mobile home would be over $250,000. The county did not have that budget. The state had no program for free weather radios. The federal government offered a matching grant program, but it was limited. The county considered installing outdoor warning sirens. The cost for a countywide system was estimated at $2 million. The county council debated the expense for months. The debate involved funding, placement, maintenance, and effectiveness. Some council members argued that sirens were expensive and would not help people who were already in their homes with windows closed and air conditioning running. Others argued that any warning was better than no warning. In September 2001, 5 months after the tornado, the county council voted to install a siren system. The funding came from a combination of county reserves, state emergency management grants, and federal mitigation funds. The first sirens were installed in early 20s Rotwell. By 2003, there were 30 sirens covering the most densely populated areas of Myrtle Beach and the surrounding communities. The siren system had a specific purpose: to wake people up. The tornado had struck at 9:28 p.m. Many residents were already asleep. The sirens would be tested weekly on the first Wednesday of each month at noon. The tests were coordinated with television and radio stations to avoid confusion, but the sirens were not enough. The NWS report on the Myrtle Beach Tornado, released in May 2001, contained a list of recommendations. The report highlighted the importance of weather radios in mobile homes. It urged the installation of NOAA weather radio transmitters along the coast. It recommended that mobile home parks be required to have emergency plans and designated shelters. It called for improved training for dispatchers and emergency managers on how to communicate tornado warnings to vulnerable populations. The report also noted a broader issue. The public did not fully understand the difference between a tornado watch and a tornado warning. A watch meant conditions were favorable. A warning meant a tornado had been detected or indicated. Many residents heard the watch and assumed the threat was hours away. They did not understand that a warning could come minutes after a watch. The NWS began a public education campaign in Horry County in 20s Rotwell. The campaign included television public service announcements, radio interviews, school presentations, and billboards. The campaign used the slogan, "When you hear the warning, take shelter, do not wait, do not look, do not doubt." The campaign also taught the phrase, "A watch means prepare, a warning means act." By 2003, the number of people in Horry County who owned a weather radio had increased by 40%. The number of mobile homes with a working weather radio was still low, but it was higher than before. In 2004, a tornado warning was issued for the same area that had been hit in 20s Rune. The sirens sounded, the weather radios beeped, the television crawl appeared, the residents took shelter, the tornado did not touch down, the community passed the test, but the emergency manager did not celebrate. He knew that the real test would be the next tornado that actually struck. The tornado that actually struck came on April 16, 2006. It was an F-12. It touched down in Conway, 20 miles west of Myrtle Beach. It damaged homes, downed trees, and injured 3 people, but no one died. The warning had been issued 12 minutes before impact. The sirens had been heard. The residents had responded. The emergency manager said, "We learned from 20s Rune. That night saved lives. It just took a while to see the results." But the results were not universal. In 2008, the National Weather Service conducted a study of tornado warning effectiveness in the southeastern United States. The study found that despite improvements in technology and communication, the rate of mobile home deaths remained stubbornly high. Mobile home residents were 5 times more likely to die in a tornado than residents of permanent homes. The study examined the reasons. First, many mobile home residents did not have access to shelter. They had no basement, no interior safe room, no community shelter within walking distance. Second, many mobile home residents were older, poorer, or had disabilities that made it difficult to take shelter quickly. Third, many mobile home residents did not have weather radios or television access. Fourth, many mobile home residents were transient. They had not been reached by public education campaigns. The study recommended that mobile home parks be required to provide community tornado shelters. The cost was a barrier. A single shelter could cost $500,000. A large park might need multiple shelters. The mobile home industry argued that the cost would drive up rents and force people out of housing they could afford. The debate continued. In 2011, a series of devastating tornado outbreaks in the southeast, including the April 27th outbreak that killed over 300 people across Alabama and the Carolinas, reignited the discussion. The deaths were concentrated in mobile homes. The NWS issued stronger language in its warnings, using words like mass devastation and unsurvivable. But the language did not change the fact that many mobile home residents had nowhere to go. Horry County took another step in 2020. The county council passed an ordinance requiring all new mobile home parks to include a community tornado shelter. Existing parks were given a deadline of 2018 to add shelters or to prove that their residents had alternative shelter arrangements. The deadline was extended. Some parks complied, others did not. By 2015, there were 14 public tornado shelters in Horry County, all of them in public buildings like schools and fire stations. None were inside a mobile home park. The county emergency manager acknowledged that the shelters were not close enough for many residents to reach in 10 minutes. The story of the Myrtle Beach tornado is not a story of a perfect system that was built. It is a story of an imperfect system that was improved. Each year brought new technology, new regulations, and new education. But each year also brought new cases of people who died in mobile homes. The problem was stubborn. In 2019, a tornado warning was issued for a mobile home park in North Myrtle Beach. The residents heard the sirens. They had weather radios. They went to the park's community building, which had been reinforced and designated as a shelter. The tornado touched down a quarter-mile away. No one was injured. The park manager said, "We remembered 20's ruin. We did not want to be the next headline." The resident of that park, a man named James, had lived in Myrtle Beach for 20 years. He remembered the night of April 23, 2001. He had been working at a hotel on the boardwalk. He had heard the sirens that night. No, there were no sirens. He had heard the wind. He looked out the window. He saw the sky peel open. He ran to the bathroom. The hotel lost its roof. He survived. After the storm, James bought a weather radio. He subscribed to emergency alerts on his phone. He moved out of the mobile home he was renting and into a brick apartment building. He said, "I will never live in a mobile home again." Not after what I saw. James's story is common. Many residents of Myrtle Beach who lived through the 2001 tornado changed their behavior. They bought radios. They learned the difference between a watch and a warning. They identified safe places in their homes. They told their neighbors. But the tourists who flooded the beaches every summer did not have that knowledge. They arrived in Myrtle Beach for vacations. They did not know that tornadoes were a risk. They did not know where the shelters were. They did not own weather radios. They relied on the hotel staff to tell them. The hotels had no uniform policy for tornado warnings. In 2001, the hotel that was hit had no internal warning system. The manager had to knock on doors. After 2001, the hotel industry in Myrtle Beach developed a standard protocol. When a tornado warning was issued, the front desk staff would call every room. The protocol worked, but it was not perfect. A call takes time. A hotel with 300 rooms might take 15 minutes to call every room. By then, the tornado might have already passed. Some hotels installed intercom systems. Others instructed guests to call the front desk for information. The County Emergency Management Office provided training sessions for hotel staff. The training included the signs of an approaching tornado: dark sky, green sky, large hail, loud roar. It taught staff to lead guests to interior hallways, bathrooms, and stairwells. It discouraged taking shelter in lobbies or glass-enclosed areas. The training was widely adopted. But the turnover rate in hotel staff was high. By 2020, many of the employees who had been trained in 2001 were gone. New employees started without knowing the history. The gap persisted. In 2021, the county emergency manager gave a presentation to the council on the 20th anniversary of the tornado. He showed slides of the damage. He showed the radar image. He showed the warning text. He reminded the council that one person had died. He said, "We have improved, but we have not solved the problem. We never will solve it completely. We can only keep trying." The council asked what more could be done. The emergency manager listed 3 things. First, more weather radios for mobile home residents. Second, a mandatory shelter requirement for all mobile home parks. Third, a comprehensive public education campaign targeting tourists. The council approved funding for 500 more weather radios. The shelter requirement remained voluntary. The public education campaign was deferred to the next budget cycle. The emergency manager sent an email to the NWS office in Wilmington. He wrote, "We are still working on it. We will not stop." The reply came back, "We know, neither will we." The story of the Myrtle Beach tornado is a story of a community that looked at a death and asked, why? The answer was not simple. The answer involved radar gaps, warning delays, communication failures, mobile home vulnerabilities, human fatigue, weather radio shortages, hotel turnover, budget constraints, and public indifference. The community worked on each of those pieces. Some pieces moved, others did not. The tornado of 2001 did not kill many, it killed one. But that one death became a catalyst. It forced a county to re-examine its entire emergency management system. It forced the NWS to refine its warning criteria. It forced the state to reconsider its funding priorities. It forced the mobile home industry to acknowledge that its products were death traps in tornadoes. It forced the public to pay attention. And yet, the next tornado in the Carolinas, when it came, would still find mobile homes. It would still find tourists who did not hear the warning. It would still find the gaps. The Myrtle Beach tornado is a reminder that progress is not final. That every storm is a test of the system. That the system can only be as strong as the weakest link. On a summer afternoon in 2023, a thunderstorm formed over the Atlantic Ocean just off the coast of Myrtle Beach. It intensified. By late afternoon, the National Weather Service issued a tornado warning for the coastal areas. The sirens sounded, the weather radios beeped. The television crawl appeared, the hotel staff called rooms, the tourists took shelter, the mobile home residents went to the community buildings. The tornado touched down on the beach well south of the tourist district. It lasted 4 minutes, it damaged no structures, it injured no one. A local news reporter interviewed a woman who had been on the boardwalk. She said she heard the sirens. She went inside a hotel. She did not know what to do, but she followed the crowd. She said she was scared. She said she would do it again. The reporter asked if she knew about the tornado of 20's Rune. She said she did not. She was born in 20's Rafiv. She had never heard of it. The story of the Myrtle Beach tornado is a story that has to be told again and again. Because every new generation of residents, every new tourist, every new child does not know about the night the sky turned black and the wind roared and one man died. And if they do not know, they will not be ready. But those who remember are still here. They are the emergency managers, the forecasters, the dispatchers, the survivors. They carry the memory. They keep trying, they keep building, because the next tornado will not wait. On the morning of June 13, 2001, less than 2 months after the Myrtle Beach tornado, a team of meteorologists from the National Weather Service gathered in a conference room in Wilmington, North Carolina. They had been assigned to conduct a service assessment of the warning process that night. Their task was to reconstruct every decision, every transmission, every radar scan, and every missed opportunity. The meeting lasted 3 days. By the third day, a picture had emerged. What they found was not a single failure. It was a chain of small failures, each one ratcheting the risk higher. The first failure was the radar gap. The WSR-8D radar in Wilmington had a beam that overshot the lowest layers of the atmosphere near the coast. The tornado formed at an altitude that the radar could not see. The velocity data showed rotation, but only after the storm had already produced a tornado. The lead time had been 5 minutes, but 5 minutes was not enough to get a warning out, have it relayed, have sirens sound, and have people move. The second failure was the communication chain. The warning text was issued at 10:08 p.m. It reached the county dispatch at 10:09 p.m. The dispatcher then had to activate the outdoor warning sirens. But the sirens were controlled by a system that required a manual code entry. The dispatcher was trained, but the code was written on a sticky note attached to the console. That sticky note had been partially obscured by a coffee cup. The dispatcher had to move the cup, read the code, and enter it. That took 20 seconds. 20 seconds in a tornado warning is significant. The third failure was the location of the shelter. The only designated public tornado shelter in the area was at a fire station on the mainland, nearly 2 miles from the mobile home park. But even if the shelter had been closer, the warning time was too short. The residents had nowhere to go. The assessment team published their report in August 20's Rune. It made several recommendations. The first was to install a second radar in the region, specifically a low-level radar capable of seeing storms near the surface. The second was to automate the siren activation system so that dispatchers did not have to enter codes manually. The third was to encourage mobile home parks to build on-site shelters. The fourth was to improve public education about the difference between a watch and a warning. The report was read by emergency managers across the country, but funding was slow. The second radar was not installed until 20's Right. The automated siren system was implemented in 20's Rotwo. The on-site shelter requirement was never made mandatory. The public education campaign was left to local communities, many of which had no budget. In Horry County, the emergency manager took the report to the county council. He asked for funding to install weather radios in every mobile home park. The council approved a pilot program for 500 radios, enough to cover about half of the parks. The radios arrived in December 20's Rune. They were distributed to park managers, who were instructed to keep them running and to alert residents when a warning was issued. But the park managers changed. Radios broke, batteries died. By 2003, a survey found that only 30% of the radios were still operational. The program had not been sustained. The story of the Myrtle Beach tornado is a story of incremental progress that is constantly eroded by time, turnover, and lack of funding. It is a story of a system that learns but forgets. In 2004, a tornado touched down in a mobile home park in nearby Georgetown County. The warning time was 12 minutes, the sirens sounded, the residents heard them. But only half of the residents went to the designated shelter, the others stayed in their homes. 2 people were injured. The emergency manager later said that the residents had not believed the warning. They had heard warnings before and nothing had happened. They had become complacent. Complacency is the silent enemy. It grows in the long gaps between disasters. In Myrtle Beach, the years after 2001 passed without another tornado. Tourists returned, hotels stayed full. The memory of that night faded. New residents moved in and did not know about the tornado. They did not know that the sky could peel open. By 2008, the county emergency manager had retired. His replacement was a younger man who had not been present in 20's Rune. He read the assessment report. He reviewed the recommendations. He implemented them again. New weather radios were distributed. A new public education campaign was launched. The siren system was upgraded with a backup generator. In 2010, a tornado warning was issued for a mobile home park in the northern part of the county. The lead time was 8 minutes. The sirens sounded. The weather radios beeped. The residents went to the community building. The tornado touched down half a mile away. No one was hurt. The park manager said that the radios had saved lives, but he also admitted that he had not tested the radio in months. It had been sitting in a drawer. The problem was not the equipment. The problem was the human element. People forget. People move on. People assume that the system will work, even when they do not maintain it. In 2013, a new study by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration examined tornado fatalities in the United States over the previous decade. The study found that mobile home residents were more than 3 times as likely to die in a tornado as people in permanent structures. The study recommended that all mobile home parks be required to have a designated shelter within walking distance. The recommendation was not adopted by any state legislature. In 2015, a tornado struck a mobile home park in Alabama. The warning time was 15 minutes. The sirens sounded, but the shelter was locked. The park manager had the key, but he was not on site. The residents broke the lock. They survived. The park manager later said that he had forgotten to leave the key. The Myrtle Beach tornado is a microcosm of this national pattern, a death that could have been prevented, a series of small failures, a recommendation that was made but not fully implemented, a community that tried but could not overcome the inertia of the system. And yet the story is not only about failure. It is also about dedication. The emergency manager who spent years pushing for change, the dispatcher who still remembers the night and double-checks the siren code. The meteorologist who wrote the assessment report and later became a national leader in tornado safety, the survivor who moved into a brick apartment and still owns his weather radio. In 2018, the National Weather Service held a workshop in Myrtle Beach for emergency managers from across the region. The topic was tornado warning improvement. One of the speakers was a retired meteorologist who had been on duty the night of April 23, 2001. He showed the radar image. He showed the warning text. He showed the timeline. He said, "We thought we had 5 minutes. We actually had less. And we learned that 5 minutes is not enough. We have to do better." The audience listened. They took notes. They asked questions. They left with new ideas. But as they left, a young emergency manager from a neighboring county said, "We have the same gaps here, the same radar blind spots, the same mobile home parks, the same lack of shelters, the same complacency. We are one storm away from repeating 20's Rune." The story of the Myrtle Beach tornado is not over. It is still unfolding. Each new year brings new storms. Each new year tests the system. And each new year reveals the same truth, that a warning is only as good as the person who hears it and the place where they can go. The night of April 23, 2001 ended with a death. That death was not meaningless. It forced a county to look at itself. It forced a community to ask hard questions. It forced a nation to examine its vulnerabilities, but it did not solve them. The next tornado in Myrtle Beach will come. It might come in the middle of the night. It might come when the tourists are sleeping. It might come when the sirens are silent because the power is out. It might come when the weather radio is dead. It might come when the shelter is locked. The question is not whether the tornado will come. The question is whether the system will be ready. And the answer depends on people, the emergency manager who keeps pushing, the dispatcher who checks the code, the park manager who unlocks the shelter, the resident who knows where to go, the tourist who pays attention. The memory of 2001 is fading, but it is not gone. It lives in the software that now issues warnings with more lead time. It lives in the concrete shelter built behind the fire station. It lives in the protocols that hotel staff follow. It lives in the quiet resolve of those who were there and will never forget. They know that the sky can change in an instant. They know that the wind can roar. They know that one death is too many. And they know that the work is never done. The Myrtle Beach tornado of April 23, 2001 is a story of a life cut short, a community shaken, a system exposed, and a long road of improvement that still continues. It is a story that deserves to be told again and again until every resident, every tourist, every child knows what to do when the sky peels open. Because the next tornado will not wait, but neither will those who remember.